6 p.m. now, Cairo local time. It's a very good evening to all our viewers and welcome to Channel 2's English News Bulletin. I'm Angie Meher. We begin straight away with a look at the headlines. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli addresses second World Summit for Social Development. Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati holds phone call with British National Advisor. Israeli occupation aircraft strike Khan Yunis in the latest Gaza ceasefire violation. Welcome back. Now the details in full. On behalf of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, the Prime Minister, Dr. Mustafa Madbouli, took part in the second World Summit for Social Development, convening from the 4th till the 6th of November in the Qatari capital, Doha. Addressing the summit, Madbouli said the world is witnessing a phase of challenges on the regional and international arenas. He added that Egypt has adopted the best international practices regarding development plans. The three-day event draws the participation of 8,000 attendees, including heads of state, governments, ministers and civil society leaders, as well as youth and workers, deputies and private sector representatives. The summit also aims to address persistent global gaps, reaffirm international commitment to social development, and reinvigorate the momentum towards achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Immigration and Expatriates, Badr Abdelati, stressed the importance of the comprehensive implementation of the ceasefire agreement and the war in the Gaza Strip, efforts of early recovery and reconstruction, as well ensuring the delivery of humanitarian aid to the Strip. This came during a phone call with the British National Advisor, Jonathan Powell, during which they discussed periodic communications to exchange views towards regional developments. The call tackled a number of regional issues, topping them the Palestinian cause. Also, the call reviewed the preparations for Egypt's hosting of an international conference for early recovery and reconstruction of Gaza. Foreign Minister and the British advisor asserted their joint keenness to enhance cooperation in various fields. The Israeli occupation aircraft struck Khan Yunis to the south of the Gaza Strip, the latest in near-daily violations of the ceasefire deal. This came as Israeli occupation artillery renewed the bombing of the eastern parts of several neighborhoods to the east of the Gaza Strip. Occupation forces are also continuing the bombing of buildings in several parts of the Strip. Since the ceasefire went into effect on October the 11th, the death toll from the Israeli occupation has now reached 240 people, whilst at least 600 injuries have been reported. 510 bodies have been recovered since then. Elsewhere, the Israeli occupation troops stormed into Bethlehem city in the occupied West Bank. Palestinian news agency said after the incursion, Israeli occupation troops were stationed in a number of neighborhoods. They also attacked a Bedouin gathering in eastern Jerusalem, beating civilians, destroying belongings and spoiling cattle food. They also had incursion to several cities and forced inhabitants of building in the Quran neighborhood to leave their homes and turn it into a military barrack. The United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, said that around 75,000 refugees are taking shelter in more than 100 buildings affiliated to the agency, most of which are damaged. The UNRWA said humanitarian circumstances in the shelters have become extremely cruel amid severe shortages of water, food, and basic supplies. It warned against the deteriorating health situation and the spread of disease due to the crowdedness and lack of sewage systems. It also called on the international community to act swiftly to provide protection for civilians and improve the deteriorating humanitarian status in the Strip, pointing out to the fact that 90% of the Strip's inhabitants are malnourished. Meanwhile, the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs stressed the importance of the swift response to humanitarian needs in Gaza. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres on Tuesday warned against violations of the ceasefire in Gaza that has halted 2 years of devastating war in the Palestinian territory. He was addressing reporters on the sidelines of the Second World Summit for Social Development in Qatar. He said that he was deeply concerned about the continued violations of the ceasefire in Gaza and added that such violations must stop and all parties must abide by the decisions of the first phase of the peace agreement. The 65th humanitarian aid convoy began entering into the Palestinian territory of Gaza via sub-portal of the Rafah land port on their way to the Karam Abu Salem border crossing, ahead of reaching Gaza. The convoy, part of an Egyptian-organized initiative called Zad al-Izza that started in late July, aims to alleviate the humanitarian suffering of the Israeli war and blockade-stricken population in Gaza. It's loaded with thousands of tons of urgently needed food, medical and relief supplies, in addition to petroleum and fuel substances. The Axis News site reported that the U.S. has dispatched a draft resolution to the UN Security Council to form an international force in the Gaza Strip with a 2-year mandate. Sources said a U.S. official stressed that the planned force will not only be tasked with peacekeeping. He said it will have de facto authority powers with regards to implementing its tasks for the stability of the Strip and security of its borders with the Israelis. To Sudan, where the Sudanese army-backed authorities will meet on Tuesday to discuss a U.S. proposal for a ceasefire in the war with the paramilitary, as the UN chief has called for an end to the nightmare of violence. The war, which has killed tens of thousands of people and displaced millions over the last 2 years, has spread to new areas of Sudan in recent days, sparking fears of an even graver humanitarian catastrophe. After mediating in other conflicts in Africa and the Middle East in recent months, the U.S. administration under Donald Trump is pushing for a ceasefire in Sudan. The army-aligned authorities had rejected an earlier truce proposal under which both they and the paramilitaries they are fighting would be excluded from a transitional political process. Meanwhile, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres Tuesday called for a halt to the fighting in Sudan, warning that the crisis was rapidly deteriorating after paramilitaries overran a key city. Guterres warned the warring parties to come to the negotiating table and bring an end to this nightmare of violence now. On the sidelines of the World Summit for Social Development in Qatar, the UN chief added that the horrifying crisis in Sudan is now spiraling out of control. Ukraine said Tuesday that Russia struck civilian, energy and port infrastructure in a massive overnight drone attack on Ukraine's southern region of Odessa. In another development, a Ukrainian drone attack damaged a petrochemical plant deep inside Russia, causing a partial collapse of a water treatment facility, but no injuries were recorded. We have the details.
Ukraine said Tuesday that Russia struck civilian energy and port infrastructure in a massive overnight drone attack on Ukraine's southern region of Odessa. Earlier, Russia said its troops had advanced in the eastern Ukrainian city of Pokrovsk, a transport and logistic hub that they have been trying to capture for over a year. But Ukraine said its forces were holding on. The Russian Defense Ministry said its forces and soldiers were destroying what it describes as surrounded Ukrainian formations near Pokrovsk railway station and industrial zone. Elsewhere, the Russian Defense Ministry said its forces had carried out heavy overnight strikes on Ukrainian military airfield and military equipment repair base and military industrial facilities, as well as gas infrastructure facilities that supported them. In another development, a Ukrainian drone attack damaged the Sternmark petrochemical plant deep inside Russia, causing a partial collapse of a water treatment facility, but no injuries. Russia sources said that the plant in the Bashkortostan region, some 1,500 kilometers from the Ukrainian border in the Ural Mountains, was operating without interruption.
Moving to the U.S., voters in New Jersey and Virginia will choose their next governors on Tuesday in a pair of races that will serve as an early gauge of the American electorate's response to President Donald Trump's norm-shattering 9 months in office. Meanwhile, in New York City, the mayoral race, Democratic nominee Zohran Mamdani faces the former Democratic Governor Andrew Cuomo, who's running as an independent. In California, voters will decide whether to give Democratic lawmakers the power to redraw the state's congressional map, expanding a national battle over redistricting that could determine which party controls the U.S. House of Representatives after next year's midterm elections. According to the City Elections Board in New York, there were 735,000 ballots cast, more than 4 times the number of 2021. Peru's government announced the country was serving diplomatic relations with Mexico over the asylum claim of the former Peruvian Prime Minister Betsy Schwarz, who's under investigation for rebellion. Peruvian Foreign Minister Hugo de Zila said that Mexico's decision to grant Schwarz asylum at its embassy in Peru's capital, Lima, constituted an unfriendly act that adds to the existing tensions between the two countries. The Office of Peru's president has accused Mexico's government of repeated interference with internal affairs of the South American country. Mexican government said it regretted Peru's decision, noting that Mexico granted asylum to the former Peruvian prime minister in compliance with international law. Typhoon Kamaije has left at least 26 people dead in the Philippines, mostly in flooding set off by the storm, which barreled across the central part of the country on Tuesday. Floodwaters trapped scores of people on their roofs and submerged cars. A Philippine Air Force helicopter with 5 personnel on board crashed in a separate incident in southern Agusan del Sur province whilst flying to help provide humanitarian assistance to the province's battered. Military officials didn't immediately provide other details about the crash, including the condition of the 5 Air Force personnel aboard and what could have caused the crash. Now moving to some business news, the Minister of Petroleum and Mineral Resources, Karim Badawi, said Egypt is working on strengthening its position as a regional energy hub, optimizing the use of infrastructure and expanding cooperation to provide energy supplies for the entire region. Minister's remarks were made as he participated in the ADIPEC 2025 exhibition and conference and held a series of meetings to review means to speed up oil and gas exploration activities. ADIPEC 2025, which is currently taking place in Abu Dhabi, brings together global energy leaders, including energy ministers from the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar, as well as CEOs of several other companies. The Minister of Planning, Economic Development and International Cooperation, Rania Al-Mashat, has participated in a high-level panel discussion on the evolving economic landscape of the African continent held as part of the CNN International event in London. During the meeting, Al-Mashat emphasized that Africa stands at a pivotal moment amidst global geopolitical and economic shifts. The minister renewed Egypt's experience in mobilizing, financing, and maximizing private sector participation through innovative partnerships with international institutions. Egypt has successfully formulated and implemented vital development projects in recent years. The national platform of the NUFI program has become a model for climate investment mobilization platforms worldwide. And moving to the Egyptian stock markets that closed higher today amid purchases by local corporations and investment funds against sell-offs by Arab and foreign investors and corporations. Market capital listed companies added 10 billion Egyptian pounds, reaching 2.8 trillion pounds at the end of the transaction, standing at 166 billion Egyptian pounds. The benchmark EGX30 rose 1.15% above 39,000 point mark. Equal weighted indices EGX70 and EGX100 climbed 0.27% and 0.44% respectively. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we wrap up our English News Bulletin here on Channel 2. You're in the company of myself, Angie Meher. Thank you for watching.